Hi, I've got a question for Liz around the use of the wiki for the license information and how that process was managed to ensure that it was accurate, because obviously it's quite potentially high risk if you've got large numbers of people accessing that.
Yeah, essentially I did most of the analysis attached to pro forma that I'd worked with my manager to look at which terms we were interested in. We've also been very careful to make a scanned copy of the licence available, so I can have a look at a rough thing, and very often if something's not allowed, that's very easy and quick to understand. Where it is allowed, I would usually actually go into the licence and just double check the exact wording for the particular situation. Certainly for us, actually having all those licences accessible has been the most important thing, and people are able to go and have a look for themselves. But yeah, we do still rely on the original document to make decisions.
I mean, Jason, just jumping in quickly, you mentioned you'd put something similar in place to what the University of Bath has been doing. Could you just very briefly kind of describe that?
Yeah, so it was part of the work we did in terms of negotiating our licences. Part of that was a paper exercise at the outset in terms of looking at our licences and kind of harvesting the information about walk-in use where it was permitted. And then essentially we've implemented something similar to what Lizz has done at Bath. At the moment we've got dedicated terminals, so we issue guest accounts to people when they arrive. They have to ask and get them from our staff, and they can log into dedicated terminals and just get the list of resources that we know we can provide walk-in access to.
Okay, thanks. So I think there was a question at the back.
Thanks. Just picking up on Jason's comments there. I'd like to ask Liz, did you have any intention from your IT department about the fact you're offering terminals that don't require any form of protocol for people to gain access at all? And I know that's the point, but if you look at the trends recently in the last year, there are plenty of discussions on general lists where people are saying we can't even have a generic login to our library staff for their LMS workflows at all. You know, you effectively have to use a PC as an individual named user because of auditing and accountability. And there seems to be quite a strong tension opening up here. On the one hand, you've got a directive, you know, coming from JISC and other people who are funding resources with taxpayers' money to broaden access, which is commendable. But equally, you've got a very correct and appropriate IT management and compliance requirement that says you can't have somebody, it's like you can't have somebody in the building you don't know about because of what if there's a fire. In a similar way, if there's a sudden spike in your usage, as was identified earlier by Trevor from GMID, you've got to be able to trace it back. And I just wondered if you had any discussions or any tensions there with your IT department about, you know, two very different aims. Thank you.
Not particularly. I mean, as I say, the terminals that we're using were already non-login ones because they were providing access to our catalogue. And as I say, we weren't permitting people to do anything other than read them on screen. So although there might be a spike in usage, that would literally be somebody sitting there and reading it off the screen because they can't actually take that data elsewhere. We had originally hoped to be able to provide printing facilities, but that would involve a login, and we decided on balance we'd rather give people access to the content than let them do anything with it. And I think because of that, I don't think there's a high risk of abuse, and we've not seen any abuse of that system so far. As I say, we can monitor the usage of those particular terminals, so we can see whether usage has been from a walk-in access terminal. And I think if we did see a spike, we would certainly be looking at reviewing it. But we're not in the city centre. There are quite a lot of barriers to actually, you know, somebody would have to be pretty determined to come and extract that data. And where licences are to resources such as Euromonitor, as Trevor was talking about, you know, we just don't allow access to it on those terminals. So if there were any doubt, or if the publisher had a problem with that, then we would just put it in our banned list, and so it wouldn't be accessible.
This question for Trevor, really. With all the kind of expansion of partnership arrangements, I just wanted to get a feel for the publisher's view on things, and particularly perhaps some of the areas that were highlighted as difficult, like staff access for overseas organisations. Does that really make you jittery, or or is that something that you're happy to go along with, as long as it is for educational purposes and for teaching students at a UK institution?
I think Jason's slide sort of covered a lot of the issues there, and I had sort of sympathy with most of the points he made. I could see some very relaxed attitudes there, and some attitudes where we would have similar positions. My central tenet here is that because of the huge price differential, the unintended consequence of making it available is hugely tempting for people who know that they can do that. So if you're looking at overseas partnerships, we would probably want to have knowledge of them and probably have a view on each of them, because with 12 offices around the world, we may well be viewing them as clients in any case. And again, that was one of the points on Jason's slide. So I think it's unfortunate that it's each case on its merits. And I'd love to sort of be in a situation where the sort of the answer of the machine is the machine. And I think with so many different sort of potential users and algorithms going, I think that is the ultimate answer. This is a new business model. It's probably not as extensive as either we think it is or you would like it to be. So you're one of the people who'd like to be franchising and doing partnerships. So let's sort of wait and see. I don't want to overstate the problem, but when there is a problem, it is a serious problem. And that's why I sort of approach it from sort of cultural and informational and educational things. I think we're all in the same boat, rowing in the same direction. So if you're going to open a partnership, there will be good partnerships and bad partnerships. I think we sometimes discuss this. Not every sale is a good sale. It needs to be a sustainable sale, and there's no point in us acquiring a client one year who isn't going to have need for information and then come back and felt they've been missold. That bad experience, that bad memory will live a lot longer than the good experiences that most of our clients have. So it's all about sustainability. So we look at it on a case-by-case basis. I'd rather not have to do that, but you're coming to us with a legitimate request. You're perfectly entitled to do that, and I would support you in doing that. And our organisation will. But let's discuss each case on its merits.
I appreciate you collectively can't talk on behalf of all publishers, but I'm interested as to whether you've experienced particular challenges as you've wanted to negotiate with global publishers about access to staff or students overseas, where you've ended up having to essentially talk to a different organisation who may well have a different set of concerns and so on. Is that a practical issue?
In terms of what we did? No, I mean, we dealt mainly with our normal contacts that we have with those information. I mean, some of them needed to check with other colleagues, but they did that internally, so we didn't get into discussions with the Asia. I mean, a lot of our partnerships are in Asia.
Yeah.
We didn't get involved in discussions with the Asian office. They had those discussions internally. I mean, there were a number of publishers that were concerned about those kinds of issues. I mean, I should have said in mine as well. I mean, our starting point in any of our partnership activity is that we don't go down the road of them needing to use the university's resources at all, particularly for overseas partnerships. So the starting point needs to be, to what extent is that partner, have they got the resources to support that student on that course of study? Is always the starting point for us. So we do a kind of gap analysis to identify if they actually have a requirement to use our resources. Yeah. Because as soon as they get to the point then of actually studying on that course, those students are in this kind of very complicated hybrid environment where they're students of the University of West of England and they've got passwords to access our resources, but they're based in Malaysia with a local library and they've got local resources available to them too. So it's incredibly complicated for students in that environment. So our starting point is always what's the local institution got, what can they provide? But in our experience, we've only had one of our partners where that institution had what we would consider to be sufficient resources to support that course, obviously without you to access at least some of our resources.
Just before we take the question, does anyone else on the panel want to comment on that? No. Okay.
Hi, I just wondered what impact it had on staff workloads having to do with like more collaborative partnerships, because I know that where I work at Aston, we kind of have enough time, we've got a lot of time we have to spend on people saying I can't get access to these resources. It's like to deal with like your day-to-day problems, trying to streamline access to resources for the majority of our students, but then like you've got some collaborative partnerships we're trying to set up, and we're finding it really difficult to kind of deal with those and deal with the day-to-day problems. I just wondered what impact it had for two people from universities in terms of the workloads for your staff.
Yeah, well, we were quite lucky because the university had identified it as a strategic priority. We were able to make a case for needing resource to help support the activities. So essentially we had two additional posts to our library staffing to help us with the work. So we've got a partnerships librarian who works with academic staff at the university and our subject teams in terms of developing relationships with the partner and working on the kind of validation of provision that's going to run in a partner. And then our partnerships librarian will also support the librarian at the local institution and the teaching staff at the local institution in terms of them being familiar with using the resource and what they've got available to them. And also we've got a separate post in our collections team and a person that did essentially all the work on negotiation with publishers and works as part of our collections team on human resources and subscription management. So we had additional resources to do it, otherwise we couldn't have done it. It would have been much more difficult to do.
We don't have the same level of international collaborations as mostly in the UK, and I think because we don't sort of do the work to give people a network login, essentially our computing services have a decision: either they are one of our students, in which case they're given access, or they are not one of our students, in which case they don't have access. And you know, walk-in access was certainly one of our approaches to helping those students who might want to use our resources be able to access what they were allowed to, but they would have to come to the university. We don't give them any remote access unless they are one of our students. And it's not really my specialism, so I couldn't sort of which is, but that's certainly decided. And we have a good list of, if they're on this type of course, they get this. So, but it hasn't yet generated any extra workload, but I'm pretty sure of the growing internationalisation of universities in this country, that I think that's certainly something that we'll be having to look at in the future.
Hi, just a question for Liz about, you say you haven't provided printing for your walk-in users, and I'm not surprised because that's kind of quite complicated. I'm a bit surprised you haven't got a download into a USB stick kind of option available. Did you consider that?
We did consider it, but again, it's because we've got a very open approach to walk-in access that we were a bit concerned about potential abuses. It's one of those things that we're sort of waiting to see what people actually ask for. We've tried to open up the content so people can come, they can read it, they can make the notes they need to, and we're not locking our resources away. But what we didn't want to do was have a situation really where people could very easily come in the middle of the night and, you know, download huge amounts of data that they could then take away with them, and that didn't seem really very reasonable. And so far I'm not aware of anybody having requested that. But it may well have come, but it certainly hasn't come to me. But we would certainly, if we had a lot of demand for it, we'd review that.